One thing's very specific, and that is understanding how an algorithm works on social media. That I think is really problematic. I think that if people understood better about how that stuff works, they would fall for less mis or disinformation. They would not use it for hours on end.
Welcome back to Love, Life, and Legacy, the podcast dedicated to helping you navigate these hypersexualized times of ours. Now, let me ask you a question. Do you know what video games are? I mean, it sounds like a stupid question. And you would probably say something like, yeah, of course I know what video games are, but do you? Do you really know what they are? I got a guest today that I met at FatherCon. His name is Jim Festante. I always feel like I'm butchering his last name, but it's out of love, Jim. He's the executive director of Health E-Habits. So health-e-habits.org, okay? And he's on the front line of helping people to understand what's going on in this world of video games. He's from the world of tech and Silicon Valley. He worked as a marketing director of all these big companies, and he knows how they operate. That's why he left that world to become a part of the cure. So I get into Roblox with him. I get into social media with him. It's a deep dive into surviving this digital era. So check it out. It's a really important episode to understand that video games are not bad inherently. There are some good ones out there, but you got to know how these websites work in order to not fall prey like so many of us do. So without further ado, let's get into it. All right. So just out of the gate, first time I met this guy, we were part of the Cardigan Club, right, Jim?
Guilty.
We were
Yes.
kind of like two anomalies in the middle of Compton wearing cardigans.
Very white. Very white.
Very extremely white. I really felt bad because I felt like we were just, coming out of some machine that generated men in cardigans. And then here we are again, second time meeting, and we're in the same color palette and t-shirt. It's uncanny, Jim. Yeah, I feel really comfortable in your presence, like I said. And I think we're also, so Jim, you're the executive director as well as I, and we're in the trenches, right? So when you meet people at a nonprofit event, it's like, there's no pretense unless it's like Greenpeace or but like real people on the ground, we're just in it. There's no pretense. It's just like, hey, you're doing cool stuff. I'm doing cool stuff. How can we help each other, right?
Yeah.
And I really felt that from you. I really felt that from you.
Despite having a cardigan, I'm not a terribly fancy man, but yeah. And I mean, I also really enjoyed getting to sit in and hear your presentation on stuff. And we're just very aligned on a lot of this.
Yeah. Yeah. And you're coming from a real tech background, which I want to understand more because that was a world I was kind of obsessed with back like 10 years ago. Silicon Valley was like, it was going to solve all the problems to the world. And it seems like maybe they just created them all. Who knows? Right. But that's the world that you come from. And so I do want to unpack that a bit. But so you're the executive director of Health E-Habits, right?
I love a good pun and a good cardigan.
We speak the same language. And so what's that all about? So I want to talk about the tech stuff later, but like what specific moment where you're like, screw it, I don't need a lot of money. I just want to help people. Yeah. I mean, it's implicit in the name of nonprofit, right? So
yeah, exactly.
At what point did you change profit to, the profit of goodwill and helping mankind?
Yeah, I had a moment a few years ago. So I volunteer with Big Brothers Big Sisters, and when I met my little, he was 11, and he would say really crazy things to me just out of the blue. We'd be in the car and he'd be like, did you know that in 50 years a star in this galaxy over there is going to explode and all the gamma rays are going to come and wipe out all life on Earth? And I'm like, dude, what? No, that's not what. And anytime I asked him, like, where are you hearing this? It was always YouTube.
I see.
And so it's just like, it just got me thinking that, YouTube is a wonderful resource for information. I've learned some really incredible things from it, but it is also full of trash. Anybody can upload anything.
Yeah.
And as an adult, I know the difference, but as an 11-year-old, he doesn't, if no one's telling him that. If he sees something that is YouTube, right, to us, which is like, NBC or ABC or HBO, right? But the difference obviously with YouTube is there's no standards and practices. So
Sure.
where he sees this polished thing, he assumes that, well, it's on YouTube, so it must be true. So it just really got me thinking about, like, again, who is teaching kids how to delineate between these things? And so at that point, I really started to think about what would that kind of media literacy curriculum look like for kids.
Well, I mean, you say kids, and I for sure, kids, but also, with the echo chambers and the algorithm, I do think that it's just becoming increasingly more complicated to decipher between what's real and fake in
Yeah.
general for everybody, right? And so, well, how's your perspective changed on this? Because you've been helping people. So that was the beginning. You started hearing crazy stuff from this kid, which is a really intense and very specific type of anxiety to have, is gamma rays in a few thousand years or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing too, right? Of just like, it's hard enough being 11 without thinking that there are all of these, problems that again just aren't real.
Yeah.
And so who knows what other kind of information that he was getting that was equally as upsetting.
And at that time, you were a part of the machine that was
It
building this stuff, right?
was. Yeah,
And
I
so,
actually, yeah.
yeah, let's get into that. I mean, what were you doing in that machine?
So at that point, I was working for a company where God, it's literally the moral antithesis to everything that I believe in. It was basically they would create advertising games in Roblox. So rather than watch a commercial for, like, Kraft mac and cheese, you could go to Kraft mac and cheese world. So instead of sitting through, I don't know, a 15 whatever second commercial, now you could just stare at a screen for hours playing a monotonous, relentless game that had no story, that had no character arcs, that had nothing, no puzzles, nothing interesting. It's just one of these clicker games on Roblox. And all it is an advertising, a way to give advertising, but then also collect information about the kids that are playing. It just,
Really?
yeah, it felt
And
really
so
gross.
it would be for these big companies that they were aware of the fact that gamifying advertising had multiple effects, including data and all sorts of stuff.
Yep.
When did they
Yep.
realize that? Like, when did that become a thing? Because,
Oh,
like, advertising has gone through this its own arc where there are a lot of latecomers to the social media thing, because social media is just for kids. But then they all started. Then that is Facebook. It's only advertising, right? So
yeah.
at what point did they realize that Roblox and gamification was like a thing?
Probably COVID, because
Oh,
that's when Roblox really blew up. Like, Roblox has been around for a while, but it really only became prominent during COVID when so many kids were home and just playing a game that sounds pretty innocuous, right? Roblox, it's got blocks in it.
mm,
That can't be bad. And so it just like really blew up in popularity, and advertisers go where the eyeballs are. And first it was television, social media, and now gaming platforms, because so many people in the demographic that they wanted to hit, because you get somebody early, well, then they become a customer for life. So that's where I think it really started to blow up, to see that kind of advertising in gaming spaces, particularly on Roblox.
how does that work though? Because let's say macaroni and cheese or whatever. It's to a kid. Let's say to an 11-year-old kid. How are they gaining benefit? Because that kid likely has $0. Where's the benefit to them? Like, because they're obviously investing millions of dollars into figuring this out, right?
Yeah. I forget, you have kids, right?
I got three.
Yeah. Have you ever been to the store and they're just tugging on your shirt going, hey, dad, I want Oreos, or I
Yeah.
want, you know what I mean? The thing that they've heard of that's in their head. So
Hmm.
it's just a way, again, just like any kind of commercial that would be on television or on social media, that just gets in their head and they think about this product. And then when they see that product, it's like, buy me that.
Got it. And so you were helping to build this, and was there an entire wing of psychology that you were then implementing through pixels on a screen? Like, was it all premeditated, or was it a lot of trial and error?
I mean, I mean, the people that were building the games knew there's just like a subset of games that are on Roblox, right? There's like runner games, there's like, you know, you can kind of map anything onto what would be a typical Roblox game mechanic. So
Sure.
it was just more of like, how do we implement that whatever company onto, whatever popular game at the time was for kids, but just like basically skinning it with advertising. And the thing that's really disturbing too is even, they've talked to kids about advertising in Roblox, and even when, there's billboards and all of this stuff that's all over these worlds, not even if it's necessarily developed specifically for one company. And they ask kids about advertising in Roblox and they say, what advertising? Because to them, that's just what's there, which I think is also really disturbing too, because then how does that translate into the real world? Well, looking, when ugly billboards go up or whatever it is, if, God forbid, advertising, putting projections on the moon, right? Like if that becomes normal for them, and just kind of that's what they expect. I don't think that's great.
Yeah, and it's so perpetual that it's just kind of there, just like a humming noise that you don't hear anymore. It's just in the background.
100%.
And so, well, this is interesting because I think I brought this up a little bit. We were all over the place when we met because there's, not so much time and we were blah 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 blah. But I think one thing that I was curious about is that guy CoffeeZilla did a deep dive into the fact that there's a lot of gambling for kids in Roblox, which is gambling for Robux. And so it's genuinely gambling, but they can skirt around it because it's not actually money, but it is, but it isn't. So, I
It's the
mean, how
same
much?
mechanic.
Okay.
And even just like with, there a lot of the games act in a similar way as far as like a dopamine hit and, the never ending treadmill of sitting in a casino, for example. Loot boxes, right? Blind loot boxes are a thing where you pay either Robux or, whatever platform you're on, whatever that microtransaction in-game currency is, that costs real money, or you actually pay real money to buy a loot box, which is you don't know what's in it. You know what the odds are of getting something good, but I mean, sometimes they're referred to as gacha games because there's gashapon in Japan, which are these vending machines that are blind loot boxes where it's
Mm,
just empty, like unlabeled boxes. You put in money and you might get the thing you want. You might not. That's gambling. When you're trying to, roll for a skin, that's gambling. You've got a lot of highs and you've got a lot of lows. And so that effect on your brain, the physiology is akin to somebody sitting at a slot machine essentially.
mm,
And just like their brain is just, in that dopamine loop of anticipation, because that's really what the dopamine chemical isn't necessarily I like this. It's I am anticipating something that I want more of. So
yeah.
even in social media terms, the dopamine hit doesn't even necessarily come on the content. It comes on the swipe because it's your brain being like, what's next? What's next? Dating apps referred to as face gambling because it's the same thing. Of just what's, who's next? Who's next? Who's next?
Yeah. My God. And so if you could help me to understand that, the decoding this, what are swipes in Roblox? It's these mystery things that you might not know what's inside. And is there anything like
Or
that
you
would
have
be
to
like,
grind for things, you know what I mean? So it's just like you have to
okay.
spend all of this time trying to get this thing, that you roll for skins. So again, it's just like that every skin or every roll rather costs Robux, money, whatever it is. And so again, it's just like I don't know. I know I want something in here, but it's like my chances are, whatever it is to get the thing that I want. And then maybe I'll get like this crazy, 1 in a million weapon, skin, whatever it is. And,
Hmm.
they'll sit there and roll for that. I would get text messages from my little sometimes at 2 a.m. And it was just like, dude, why are
Jeez.
you up? And he's like,
Yeah.
oh, there was this thing that I wanted to get on Roblox.
Good Lord. So it just creates an obsessive kind of compulsion to figure it out or to get to the next thing, but there is a perpetual never ending stream of next things.
Yeah. It was really interesting to me to hear that casinos make most of their money from slot machines. I would have thought it
What?
would be like, big money poker tables but it's
Hmm.
not. It's slot machines. And it's because people just sit there and they get into the zone and are just spending money. And it's not even the gambling that they're there for. It's that feeling of being just kind of like checking out and being in the zone. Casinos make I think the number was like 80% of their profits from slot machines.
The slot jockeys. That's wild. Is that the most shocking thing that parents don't know about Roblox? That was one of my
No,
official questions.
that
Help
is
me
one of
unpack
several.
this. Okay.
I would say the most shocking is how dangerous it is.
Please explain this to me because I was trying to have this conversation with my kids. They're having sleepover tomorrow. They don't do that often. They have a kid that has very few regulations with his devices, and so I was just talking about we have a standard. They have a different standard. We don't judge them, but here's our standard travels with us, right? So just helping them to kind of prepare a little bit. But I still don't really know the reality of what goes on in this world. It's not my world. Roblox is not. I watch them play some of the games, but I don't know what's inside this thing. So please help me to understand, like, what is this? Sounds like a Jack in the Box with filled with methamphetamines and murderers, and anything could pop out at you. But I don't really understand how that is true or how that could possibly be with such a giant platform that, honestly speaking, I travel. I saw kids in Vietnam, in Mongolia, everywhere playing Roblox. It's the
Yeah.
big thing. So how is it so unregulated and ubiquitous?
So a couple things that are problematic. The two that are, I think, at the top is, Roblox is a platform, right? And a lot of people don't understand that and they think Roblox is a game, and it's not. It's a platform that you can make games for. So that's called user generated content, UGC, and anyone can make anything, really, and
Mm.
upload it. And when you have sometimes millions of games being uploaded daily, you
What?
can't moderate that. That's
Mm.
impossible. And they say, like, oh, we use AI models to help us moderate. AI doesn't understand nuance. It's not, it doesn't understand anything, first of all, because it's not intelligent. That's a misnomer. It's a language model, right? So it just recognizes patterns. So it cannot pick up on the subtleties sometimes of what content is actually being uploaded to the platform. There was a story a couple weeks ago about how the big middle school video game that kids were playing on Roblox and sometimes in their classroom was Escape from Epstein Island. I
Jesus.
mean, that's problematic for a variety of reasons. So I would say UGC is one problem, but the bigger problem is it is a haven for predators. I sound like such a pearl clutching, tinfoil hat wearing, but
Sure.
but it's true. It's real. And you can go to any major newspaper, magazine. They've all done stories about this where it is a haven for predators. We had an experience with a family friend who she went into her 12-year-old daughter's bedroom, and her daughter was on a Zoom call and the camera
Whoa.
was off, and she heard a man's voice and she's like, "What is this?" And her daughter said, "Oh, I met this person on Roblox and they said we should take it to Zoom." So it
Wow.
there are pedophiles that are grooming kids, there it sounds so like out there, and I'm just like trying to scare people, and I promise you I'm not. Again, this is all over the news. You can look it up.
Sure.
The CEO is just a very problematic person. He was on there was a podcast, I think, oh God, Hard Fork, I think it's called, the New York Times. And the interviewers really held his feet to the fire and asked him difficult questions about the safety and security of Roblox. And toward the end of the interview, which I highly recommend anyone who enjoys awkward comedy go listen, they talked to him about prediction markets like Polymarket, and which again, that's gambling. And they said to him, would you ever consider putting that kind of mechanic into Roblox? And he's like, oh yeah, absolutely, I think that's a really interesting idea. And the hosts were like, that's not the answer we were expecting. And I think one of the hosts even said, like, yeah, never too late to get them hooked on gambling, right? So it's the problem that you see with social media companies, like their internal communications, all of their internal studies that are coming to light from whistleblowers, from litigation, where they know how problematic this is for kids and they don't care. They could fix it and they won't, because that cuts into their profit margin. And again, that sounds crazy. Like, why would who would be that like that's cartoonishly evil?
Yeah.
Unfortunately, again, we have that evidence on the social media side. The best way to find that evidence, the best people that have been doing those studies is Meta. So there's an entire website of Meta's internal studies that have come to light from whistleblowers, from litigation, that show all of their internal studies about how they know how bad this is, especially for kids, and they don't care.
Well, don't they categorically deny it in
No,
Congress,
of
like,
course.
anytime it comes up? But you said it's on Meta's website or something? This
It's somebody made a website with all of the internal studies. It's forget what it's exactly called, but if you search Meta internal research, it should point you to it's like 30 or so studies that somebody uploaded to a website. But and you say that like, yeah, they sit in front of Congress and say these things. Well, that's what happened in the 90s with tobacco companies. Remember, they sat there
Yep.
and under oath said nicotine isn't addictive.
Wow. And so from that world, if you can help me to understand, when you look at Silicon Valley, I think for quite some time, like I said, maybe 2015 around that time, they really seemed like they were trending towards saving the world. And they really seemed like the hero in the story. And that's the narrative that they believed. Heard anybody from kind of that tech world on a podcast at that time, and they were super hopeful, and we got this, just give us your money. And now it seems like now we're kind of waking up to the fact that they have done bad things. But my question is, um how evil are their intentions? Or are they just so relentless to grow exponentially that they just don't care about the collateral damage? Is this because I find it hard. Like, I just saw a video about Zuck yesterday, and he's really doing a lot of, character development in terms of like his promoting himself to become more relatable. But I still don't believe that he's like evil in the sense where he's trying to be, but it's more like he's evil in letting bad things happen on his watch and not standing up for it. But could you help me to understand this world, like the tech world?
Yeah.
We're talking Roblox, but we're also talking about porn and like,
It's all the same. It's because
okay.
it's a similar kind of person where it might not be necessarily I am out for nefarious purposes. However, I understand. To me, what's the difference between that and I understand how bad this is, and I don't care because it's making me and my shareholders rich. So, for example, there was a tell-all book, a whistleblower book that came out. I want to say at the top of the year. I don't remember. Time means nothing anymore. But it was this woman who was in Zuckerberg's inner circle. It's
Hmm.
called I always blank on the name of this book.
Sure.
Careless People. Careless People. And they didn't even announce the book until the day before it came out because they knew they were going to get sued. And she was in his circle for years. And one of the things that she talks about, so I'll give you an example. I also highly recommend people get the book because it's a horrifying, interesting read. But she talks about the first time that Trump was elected, and they were getting on a plane to go somewhere. And Zuckerberg was furious because he's like, oh, the press is saying that Facebook got Trump elected. And the people that were there with him were like, well, we did. And so over the course of the plane ride, she talks about how they explained to him how Facebook targeted certain communities, misinformation, with that the Trump campaign, used to reach these people and kind of sway them in a very, unethical way. And so by the time that they got to their destination, she says that, they made it clear to him what Facebook did with the Trump campaign. And rather than a normal person saying, my God, that's a threat to our democracy, we should make sure that can't happen again. His response was, how do we get this into more campaigns? How do we embed people with additional campaigns so that we can, again, make money off of this thing and steer elections?
Got it. So being complicit in a overt ignorance, but an internal using what works to get clicks and to keep
Yeah.
people.
I mean,
But do
another
they?
thing.
You go.
Oh,
You go.
sorry, go ahead.
No, you go. You go.
I was just going to say, like, another thing, too, to look at is the fact that, every Silicon tech parent, they send their kids to schools with books. They don't send their kids to schools with Chromebooks, iPads. They limit screen time. There was an interview with Evan Spiegel, I think that's his last name, the CEO of Snapchat, and his wife. They were doing a big puff piece on her, essentially. And they asked her if their house has a movie theater in it. And she said, well, my husband limits our kids' screen time to, I think she said, an hour and a half a week. So they know. So it's fine for our kids, but their kids they're going to protect.
Yeah. Yeah, got it. It's a hard thing to understand because that's going scorched earth to the moon because it
Yeah.
it impacts the entire world, right? Because I've definitely heard that after that initial election, then there was a lot of tampering in Asia. I forget which country it was that Facebook was really messing up some
Think it was
elections over there.
Malaysia. I think it was, yeah, they were like stoking, there was like a big problem with stoking racial divides. So many people were killed. Again, Careless People is a really interesting book. There's other accounts from insiders and whistleblowers, but that book had a lot of really interesting stories in it concerning those things because her role was she was coming from the UN. I think she was working in some kind of capacity with the government of New Zealand, and she recognized, this is 2015 earlier, I think maybe that Facebook was going to have to deal with global governments, right? It wasn't just going to be something that was contained in the US. This was going to it's spreading worldwide. So at some point, they're going to have relationships with governments worldwide. And so her pitch was, let me come in and help you with that because I have had that experience at the UN. And it took her forever to even get them to realize that what she was saying was correct. And she came in with good intentions. But again, I think a lot of people came in with good intentions. Even there's a lot of programmers from the early days of social media that were like, we're doing a good thing. And then once they saw that it was not going the way that they had hoped it would, they left.
Hmm.
And that's where, yeah, you have your whistleblowers, you have, Tristan Harris, you have like a lot of people from those companies that are speaking out against, the change that they saw while they were there.
And is that kind of your story as well? Is your story
No,
you're okay.
not as much, not as much. I mean, I was more on the marketing side of things
Okay.
for like companies like Microsoft and Meta and Adobe. So I was more about like creating the strategies and developing content, particularly for social channels of like trying to steer certain products or one of the last gigs I had as a creative director was for Meta Horizons World. And, I didn't really know much about it going in. I was just hired as a creative director who had worked on a lot of social channels before. And so I got my Meta, 3D, the Meta headset. I'm blanking on the name of it.
Oculus?
Oculus, and go into Horizon Worlds. And it's just,
Quick pause. If you're serious about your future blessing, but not really preparing for it, then this is your moment. Don't do it alone, guys. Go to highmoon.org.
a sea of kids' voices and saying horrible things to each other because of anonymity, right? Online. And they shouldn't have been there. And it just was very shocking, the things that I heard. And I think I lasted 3 weeks before I quit
Just because it was so disturbing, you had to
because
quit?
just felt wrong. It just felt like I should not be creating content to get people onto this platform that I found to be highly problematic.
And you worked with a bunch of different companies, right? You even worked with Disney and Pixar.
Mhm.
And so one question I had was like, are they contributing to this as well? Like, are they manipulating people psychologically? Are they innocent? Because there's like media and then there's social media. Are they in it together? Are they in the muck together?
I mean, no company in capitalism has clean hands, right? Like that's just no company, especially at that level, has clean hands. There is, however, I think a difference between story and content, for example. So like Disney makes movies, they make TV shows. Are they the best? Or, sometimes they're cash grabs and just, revamps of franchises we've seen for decades. Sure. Okay. That's not my favorite thing, but also like they're still telling stories that have a beginning, a middle, and end. There's lessons to be learned, right? Morality. And I don't mean that in a religious way of just like what is what right and what is wrong. So I don't fault that at all. Like that's still storytelling. And as human beings, like that's our superpower. That's how we got where we are, is telling each other stories and cooperating with each other. So I don't think that is necessarily the same. But yeah, those companies are still problematic, but not in the way of just the way that how the social media companies in particular and some of these gaming companies target children to take advantage of them.
Got it. Yeah. And it's also, there's like a finite end to the relationship. Like when a movie ends, it ends.
Mhm.
they haven't found a way to make a movie last for days, but a video game can do that, right? It can cause you to not wanna I remember, I don't know if it was true, but maybe, like, 20 years ago or something, some lady let her kid die because she was just playing this game for days and she forgot to feed her kid. It was like, this is like late thousands, like 2009 or something like that.
Well, I know that there
Movies
have been
can't really do
stories
that.
in Asia, I think, like, in gaming cafes where people have just keeled over and died because they've been playing a game for so long. And I wanna clarify too, because this actually, I think, is problematic in the discourse around video games. Video games is not a monolith in the way that social media is, for example. Because when you talk about social media, the underlying mechanism is an algorithm that is designed for retention. That's it. Across, it doesn't matter what app it is, the algorithm is designed to retain you on the platform because the longer you're there, the more information they get about you, which translates into the more money that they can make selling that information to advertisers. Do some video games do that? Yes, absolutely. However, there are still plenty of video games that are designed with a beginning, a middle, and an end, with puzzles, with story, with character arcs. So I think it's really important that we distinguish between the two, because on the one hand of the discourse that I'm hearing are parents that are saying ban it all, right? It's all
Yep.
addictive. There's no benefit to video games, which is not true. And then on the other side of the discourse, you have parents who are saying, I don't understand video games and I don't want to. So I'm just going to let my kids do whatever they want. So if
Yeah,
we
yeah, yeah.
don't meet in the middle and talk about the nuance and the reality, well, we're cutting off all of these kids that are playing these games, that are in these Discord servers, because gaming is their culture and it is important to them and can be fine. There's nothing wrong with them per se. But if you can't delineate between, these casino-like games that are taking advantage and are just solely designed for extraction versus games that are more creative and, again, have those great elements of story and puzzles and character, you're cutting off a conversation and you're leaving kids vulnerable, because ban it all doesn't work for sure. Abstinence education is not education, right? Kids are going to find ways to play video games. So you have to teach them what are those mechanisms so that they can figure out for themselves how to delineate between those two types of games. Otherwise, they're going to fall for those traps and it's just going to extract time, money, data from them. And it can be incredibly problematic.
Let's get into that because I remember you talking about that, this idea that parents should play video games with their
Yeah.
kids. So unpack that. Help me to understand what does that look
Yeah, I
like?
mean, again, because it is kind of a cultural thing for kids, more so than I think it was when we were growing up. We used to have a shared culture around TV shows, movies, like everybody was kind of watching the same stuff. And so
Mhm.
those were things that we were talking about. And I don't see that as much now. There's a lot of rebooted IP from our day that doesn't really speak to kids these days, where it's just like, oh, this is your thing. It's not ours. And so outside of, contemporary tentpole shows like Stranger Things or movies like K-pop Demon Hunters, there's not that kind of conversation that we used to have around this particular type of media, but there is gaming culture. And so when we dismiss it as being dumb or we don't understand it, again, you're cutting off a line of communication with your kids.
Mm.
So play with them, see what kinds of games they're playing so that you understand it too and can make better decisions. And also, it's a great way to bond with your kids. I don't enjoy Minecraft. It's not for me. I like stories when I play video games, but my son is really into Minecraft. And so, we'll sit and he'll walk us through some things that he's built. And he's built some really incredible, cool things. But having that interest and sitting down and playing with them is a great opener for communication with them, to show them that you're interested in what they're doing. You're approaching them with curiosity instead of, coming at them with rules and, looking at it from that point of view. And so it's a way to, yeah, just bond with your kids, to understand what they're doing, to make sure that they're being safe, and have fun with them.
Well, that's one of you say connection over correction. Yeah. And
Yeah, because
so,
it's really important. That's a big distinction. It's kind of akin to what we were talking about before of abstinence versus, having free reign over this stuff. When you're just correcting them, no one wants to be corrected, right? No one wants like, and granted, yeah, there that's a hard thing about being a parent is that is your job to correct, right? But also we have to connect with them too and share interests and learn more about them as people, right? Because ultimately we're not raising, there's a great quote, we're not raising kids, we're raising adults. And so we want to make sure that we're guiding them in a way that allows them to make better decisions for themselves when they get older. And so
Mm.
what better way than to kind of do these activities with them and they learn from you and you learn from them and it's kind of a just a win-win situation.
What about young adults? Because I mean, just porn and video games are the stress reliever for an entire generation, right? When they don't know how to handle life. And obviously, escaping is never the answer and it leads you away from yourself and solutions. But how do they, let's say you're going to college and obviously you're playing video games. I know a couple of these people, right? So what do they do? How much is enough and how do they regulate? Or do you have any tips on how to manage a
Yeah,
healthy
I mean,
dose of video games?
that's where that education comes in, right? Because if you're working with your kids when they're younger and you're playing games with them, you're setting guardrails and guidelines around them, right? Like I'm not just saying let them play whatever they want. I mean, for example, my son is 8, so during the school week, we don't play video games. Like that's just, school night, no games. And then
Yeah.
on the weekend, we have a time, right? Like an hour on Saturday, we have a structure around that. As he gets older, I am going to want more input from him about the rules that we make so that he has more agency and control over his life, age dependent. Because when he leaves my house, I want him to be able to have good habits and be able to make these decisions for himself. So that's again why it's really important to sit and play with them and have these conversations. For example, like that is a stress release for me is playing video games. And when I went to college, my dad got me a gaming PC because he knew that. But because I had so many other interests and because I knew how to regulate myself, it wasn't as much of a problem for me. There are plenty of people that I have heard of that have dropped out of college because of a video game addiction. Dr. Luck, oh my God, why am I? Dr. K, he has a company called Healthy Gamer, and it's fantastic. And so he was one of these kids that dropped out of college because of video games and eventually went back to school, became a therapist. He was like helping people with digital addiction. What I love about that story too is like it wasn't the end of the story for him, right? We think like it's so devastating. Like, my God, a kid failed out of college because they were so addicted to video games, but he was able
Mm.
to learn from that. Like, it just, it can be problematic. It's never the end of the story. So I guess it's just like, yeah, this is just a roundabout way of me saying like having those discussions earlier with them and getting them into those good habits is really important. And also just, yeah, like being there to talk to them and hope that like, the lessons that they've learned over that time inform how they behave when they're outside of the house, which again is why it's so important to make sure that you are having these conversations instead of just, again, either saying do what you want or don't play games at all.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. A healthy balance. Because honestly speaking, like you're saying, somebody who would flunk out of college because of a gaming addiction, that to me is not a sign of like they're a delinquent or they're degenerate, but they're probably a genius. If you could go that deep into something and that obsessed with something, it's just misaligned, obviously, but it's a sign of brilliance that you could devote yourself to something so wholly and fully that the world would crumble around you. And obviously, you need to navigate that, right? But everybody that I've ever known that felt like a loser because they had something that was consuming too much of them. I really saw the other side of that, that they have a genius that's just untapped and just completely being wasted by something that's not reciprocating anything back to you, like a video game addiction, right?
Yeah, or it's just an extreme coping mechanism, right?
Yeah.
And there's like how scary it is to be out on your own for the first time and you're setting your own schedule and you're responsible for getting to class and for doing your
Mhm.
homework. No one's over your shoulder telling you to do these things and
Yeah.
it's scary.
Yeah, there's a lot. There's too much. Talking about too much, I'm aware of the fact that you do this. You're steeped in this world, right? Like this is likely what you think about on the clock and off the clock alike because it's a passion. So I
And the
want
having
to,
a year old.
yeah, exactly. And so you have a vested interest.
Yeah.
But what is something that you just wish that everybody could know from the work, from all the data that you're seeing, from all the stories that the people, trends that you've observed, something that you wish you could have a bell and just walk around saying, everybody know this? Is there something that you feel like we're completely ignorant to that it could be good, could be bad?
I think I'll say two things. One thing's very specific, and that is understanding how an algorithm works on social media. That I think is really problematic. I think that if people understood better about how that stuff works, they would fall for less mis or disinformation. They would not use it for hours on end. They would use it better for communication with family, friends, and yeah, just like because the companies aren't going to change the algorithms themselves until they're regulated to do so. So in the meantime, that's where the education is really important. And the other thing that I would say that is less specific but more general is twofold. One, just talk to each other. For the love of God, talk to each other. Like there are so many instances where norms could change if people were just talking about them. For example, the gift from elementary to middle school in my son's school has been a smartphone, which is way too young for a kid to have a
Mm.
smartphone in middle
Uh-huh.
school. 9 out of 10 parents that I've spoken with about this have all said the same thing, which is, I didn't want to do it, but everybody else was. So I felt like I had to. If those 9 parents are all talking to each other, that doesn't have to happen anymore. That norm can change and they can realize, like, oh, we don't want to do this. I think there's this worry of, people are going to feel like I'm judging you or, I'm sticking my nose in your family's business. That's the wrong approach because it's just a question of having conversations, again, coming with curiosity instead of judgment and
Mm.
saying, like, look, I've heard this and I'm worried about this. And what are you doing about this? Right? Like opening it up and having those conversations that's how we can change norms. And so I guess the other part of that is just there are so many resources out there to understand this stuff. I know it feels overwhelming because in some respects it is overwhelming, right? We as parents, we're so busy with, just even the minutia of family life, let alone our jobs, the
Mhm.
economy right now, our political situation, our climate situation. Like there's so much to do and worry about that it's like, I cannot take on one more thing. Unfortunately, you have to. This is not an area you can abdicate your attention from. But fortunately, there are resources out there that can keep you up to date. There are plenty of blogs, Substacks by very smart people doing the work that you can stay informed by. And so having that information allows you to make those better decisions because if you don't have education around this stuff, it's hard to make those decisions. For example, it's kind of like food nutrition labels, right? Where it's like, if you don't know what's in your food, how are you going to make good decisions about what you eat? And it's the same thing about tech is like, you have to understand what is the mechanisms underneath some of this stuff so that you can make better decisions about it. Because again, I'm not anti-tech. I'm not saying this stuff is bad or problematic at its core, but there is, it can be problematic if you don't understand how it works. And there are, again, so many resources, books, blogs out there that take minimal investment to keep yourself updated about what's happening.
Yeah, I agree. It's the conversation that is the whole purpose anyway, right? Is to get to know your kids and to find out what they're into and to help guide them, right? In some positive direction.
And
So,
and other parents, right? We need
yeah,
that community.
yeah.
This is not something that we can do in isolation. It's a collective action issue.
And young adults too. I mean, that was you came to that presentation. That's the meat is all in connection. It's not just the antidote from isolation, but it's the whole purpose of our life is to be connected beings, right? It's
Yeah.
where all the magic is. So explain what your core offering is in terms of healthy habits and what you offer to the world and what people can get from you and from your website and your resources.
Yeah, it's twofold, right? It is that education, giving people the things that they need to understand about devices, AI, social media, video games, so that they can make decisions for themselves, for their family. There's no silver bullet. That's also what makes this stuff difficult, is it is family dependent, it's child dependent, right?
Hmm.
So, but again, you need that information to be able to make those good decisions for your family. So I offer that. And then the second part of it is that communication angle of how do you talk to other people about this stuff? I would consider myself very good at talking to people. I'm very comfortable doing it. However,
I
when
concur.
I sat down to write an initial email for my own son's school parents a couple of years ago about starting a group to talk about this stuff. I kind of was like paralyzed at my keyboard of how much information is too much. Am I turning people off? Am I, you know what I mean? Like all of those
Sure.
fears of like, so I kind of hit on like some strategies that I thought worked for us that I've been able to hand off to other parents. Like one of the things that we did in our first meeting that I thought was really fun and it set the course for the other meetings was bring your kids. We're going to a park, let them play while we talk, and then I'll order pizzas and we can all enjoy pizza together. And it was like a nice hour of all of us together while our kids played, which is great because they need that outdoor play with each other. And then the adults all got to talk without being distracted by our kids. And then we all came together and had pizza.
Yeah, I love it. And so forming community around figuring this out together
It's
kind of thing?
necessary. You
Mhm.
can't do it by yourself. You've got to do it, even if it's just with your kids' friends' parents, right? Just that immediate circle of a couple parents, like that is so much better than trying to figure this out on your own. And so many times after workshops, parents come up to me and say, "Oh, I thought I was the only one thinking about this stuff." Everyone is thinking about this stuff, which I think is also something that gives me optimism. Whereas, we talk about, the tobacco industry, for example, car safety, even like these things took a while for those norms to change, for laws to pass.
Mm.
Whereas I think our addiction to technology and our children's addiction to technology is so obvious and in front of our faces that that ship is turning relatively quickly in regard to other social changes that have happened in our society.
Mm. In a not so great way?
No, in a great way.
Oh,
In
okay.
that we're having these conversations, that we're talking about it, and we're doing something to fix it. I
I
think it's
see.
happening a lot faster than problems that we've had as a society in the past.
Because it's so acute and so prevalent that
I
it's
think
just
so. I think
unavoidable?
because it's hard to deny. Cancer in cigarettes takes a while to manifest. Our children's attention spans over the past decade and their test
Mhm.
scores and the inability for some of them to communicate, look each other in the eye, like that's right in front of our faces. And we can see
Mm.
that on a daily basis.
Yeah, yeah, it's true. I agree. I mean, that's how we started was focusing on porn and it just forced the hand of a conversation that was meaning to happen for thousands of years. Which is
Yeah,
like, what do we want to do with this thing that we have known as sex, which has always been taboo and all this, right? But when something becomes so obviously disjointed and perverse from its original intention, like our kids' attention spans or whatever, yeah, it becomes very obvious, like a stain in a shirt. And it's like, what do you wanna do about this, right? Yeah,
yeah.
that's so you're feeling positive ultimately.
I am. We have a lot of work to do, don't get me wrong, but I
Sure,
am
for
feeling
sure.
positive. But yeah, I'm glad that you are tackling that the topic of pornography. I mean, I can you imagine growing up and thinking that Pornhub is sex? I mean,
Yeah.
Jesus Christ. It's kind of in the same way of like if you watched a fight sequence in a movie and you're like, that's fighting.
Yeah, yeah,
It's two dudes going like this at each other.
yeah. Yeah, it's just in isolation, it all makes sense to an immature brain because you just download giant concepts at a time and accept the whole thing,
Of course.
and it's not fair, it's really not fair.
No.
I recorded another podcast yesterday and I was thinking back to like how much I'm indebted to the era in which I was born because I would have been consumed by this whole hog 100%. Because I was
Yeah.
even talking to a 25-year-old leader of youth and he was talking about the kids, right? So he's a kid to me, but he was like, the kids these days, their phone addiction is way worse than my generation. So it's only scaling upwards and outwards unless we nip it in the bud. And our government clearly, it seems like either side of the aisle don't really have a vested interest in us doing the work that we should be doing anyway. Honestly, is just
Some
like,
of it. Some of it. Because I will say that I do think that talking about some of the social media stuff has been a bar maybe the last bipartisan issue, but also like, yeah, you don't always have people in government that like the average age is like 70 something, right? And so it's like, these are immediate problems that are
Yeah.
happening, that I'm not trying to be ageist, but
Sure, sure, sure.
that's not really within their purview to solve.
Sure.
So that's, and especially God, you started to get into AI as well, but like, yeah, it is something that I do think people are trying to work on from the outside in, and they're very passionate, dedicated people. Some of them that have lost children to social media,
Mm.
which is horrifying and sad, but they're stepping up and saying, I can't let this happen to any other kids. And so they're trying to make sure that this legislation is put in front of lawmakers so that these laws can go in place and these companies can be regulated.
I love it. So I guess let's end with that. Let's end with, I want to hear the most positive outlook that you have on the future based on your work. And like you're saying, people are rising up. People are saying enough is enough. How is this manifesting in a way that gives you hope? Because you're in the trenches, like I said.
Yeah, I think part of it is the legislation. I think that there does need to be legislation around this stuff. I think passing social media bans, I know some people are saying like, oh, that's not how you do it. And like kids are going to get around it. But it is just like kids can't handle it. They just can't handle it. And I don't think in the current state that social media is in, that it is safe for kids, especially kids under 16. If in the meantime, you're not also giving them lessons in media literacy so that when they are old enough to use this stuff, they understand it and can use it in a more safe way. Because I don't think, and I'm not under any illusion that this stuff is going away. It's not. But we need to understand what it is in the same way that when a kid turns 16, we don't just throw car keys at them and say, good luck, you're old enough to drive now. We
Mhm.
teach them in the meantime how to operate a car. And it is the same thing that we need to do with technology. We have got to give them media literacy in their classroom on a daily basis. That's not its own thing, but it's baked into current curriculum so that they're using these skills of critical thinking and media deconstruction so often that it just becomes baked into how they think about this stuff, so that when they are old enough to use it more responsibly, they have the knowledge and the wherewithal to do it in a more healthy way.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, that's the vision aspect, right? Is like, how would you like to function as a family with technology? We have to answer that question. It's a
Yeah.
non-negotiable because it's either it'll start to just creep in and it'll start to just take over every facet of your life unless you trim it and decide what it needs to be for you. It's meant to be our servant, not our master.
Yeah.
Yeah, great. Thank you. And thank you for all the work that you're doing. I think that's what I love
You too.
about meeting different people because it's going to take a bunch of us to, attack different elements of the present culture that we're living in order to create a better future. So I appreciate all your work, Jim. And thank you for coming on and for chatting with me.
Thank you, Andrew. Yeah, and I appreciate your work as well. I mean, as
Yeah.
dads, like we got a vested interest in this stuff.
Yeah, it's more than anything just modeling a way because otherwise we're like, okay, you guys, you're going to have this crazy situation that we know nothing about. Good luck, but instead we're like with them. We're like, I will show you how to use this
Yeah.
thing called a phone.
And I wish, just one more thing to say, like, I wish more dads would step up. I think that this is an issue that moms are overwhelmingly trying to fix.
Oh, really?
And it's not fair. I want to see more dads get involved in this work. And so we
Mm.
don't show up at these meetings and it's like 8 out of 10 parents are moms. It's not fair. Like we as dads have to step up too. And I really hope more dads do that.
Yeah. Yeah. Appreciate you, Meng.
You too.
I know you got a meeting, so I'm going to let you go, but thanks for everything.
Yeah, this is lovely. Thank you.
Thanks, buddy.
A strong marriage doesn't start at the blessing. It starts right now in how you live, how you grow, and who you surround yourself with. If you've been passive, unsure, or just hoping things will work out in your future blessing, this is your chance to change that. To prepare with purpose, to walk with others who are taking this seriously. If that's the kind of foundation you want in your future, guys, check us out. Join our community at highnoon.org. Totally free. We will see you there.